this video we're going to talk about presuppositions, what they are and why they're important. Let's take a look.
Oh look, another car theist. What is it with God botherers and filming in cars? Is this some sort of Jesus take the wheel thing? This guy isn't going to so much argue in favor of presupposition, but rather to make excuses for having presuppositions. But either way, his argument is the debate equivalent of an old granny in the carpool lane with her left blinker on. Let's do this.
Round one, fight!
Delusion!
Logic boo! Logic boo!
You win!
Greetings, fellow space travelers. BionicDance here. Presuppositional apologetics is, frankly, really obnoxious. Presuppers start from the position that their religion is true, and nothing can be understood without first filtering it through the lens of their beliefs, which means that there is no room for the possibility of being, you know, wrong. No chance they'll change their minds, no matter what. Like I said, obnoxious.
So the dictionary defines presupposition.
Sorry, but no. Going to the dictionary for complicated subjects like this is a major fail and an exercise in equivocation. It's easy to take definitions that are nothing like the actual topic and then try to cram your opponent's arguments against your position into that mold. First, go to an encyclopedia, then make sure you're on the relevant entry. Here we go. Presuppositional apologetics. Look at all that text. More than just a 1 or 2 sentence soundbite, and it's narrowed our focus down to the kind of presupposition to which critics of religion object. That is where you go to set the terms of the debate, not a dictionary.
So basically, presuppositions are unargued assumptions, or things that people take as facts without any proof.
Oh, it goes much further than that. Presup doesn't just make assumptions, it begs the question. It starts from the assumption that the very subject of the debate is already settled. No need to prove it to others who don't agree or aren't so sure. Presuppers start from an unproved position and then use that as the basis for their further arguments. It's the equivalent of closing your eyes, covering your ears, and going la 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 la.
The reason they're important is because everybody has presuppositions. Everybody has them. And it's important to be aware of what those presuppositions are before you engage or debate or try to argue with anyone.
As I'll show in a minute, that's something you don't do. Actually, you'll show it. I'm just going to point it out. But again, presuppositional apologetics isn't the same as making an assumption or two. And the people who are objecting to presuppery aren't just telling you to check your assumptions. It's far more than that.
And it's important to know, like Greg Bonson said, facts do not determine what somebody will believe.
They will if they're honest, critical thinkers with an ounce of humility. It stinks to be proved wrong about something, but I have definitely changed my mind when the facts weren't on my side, and so have a lot of people I've known. If you're not doing it, what's wrong with you?
This is certainly the case when it comes to the God debate. If somebody presupposes or just assumes that science is the only way to get at truth, that through the scientific method is the only way we can ever know anything about reality, then obviously they will immediately reject anything that is not scientifically verified. If somebody believes that the physical world is all there is, that nature is all that exists, then you can't have a conversation about the supernatural because it's immediately rejected based on their presupposition.
And the only way anybody can think this is if they don't actually understand science. Science studies reality. If the supernatural exists, it's part of reality, and that means we can scientifically test it. And if it's not part of reality, if it has no effect on the material world, then someone just made it up as a story, because how could they ever have found out about it? Let's take God out of the equation for a moment and just discuss the supernatural. If we could prove the existence of, say, sorcery or ghosts, I'd believe in it, despite the obvious breaking of what we'd previously known about the nature of reality. We'd have to test it pretty thoroughly to make sure that there's no trickery of any sort, obviously, but I'd believe it if I could replicate the effect under controlled conditions. And it's the same for a god. Render faith unnecessary by replacing it with facts, and bingo, I'm a believer. Maybe not a follower, sure, but I'll accept the existence of a deity. If science is being done right, it's being done with an open mind, knowing that one's presuppositions should be vulnerable to logic, reason, and evidence. But that doesn't seem to be the picture of science in your head, and that needs to change.
This is also the case concerning any discussion or debate that you would have about anything with anyone. Take the abortion issue, for example. There is a fundamental disagreement on a presupposition regarding abortion. The pro-choice advocate simply believes that the entity in the womb is not a life.
And that is a presupposition you need to let go, because it's not true. I don't know anybody on either side of this issue who says that it's not a life. The disconnect here is that for the pro-choice side of this debate, whether it's alive or not isn't the relevant criterion. Now, I don't want to get into the actual arguments. This video isn't about abortion. But you're obviously not even listening to the other side. You're filtering their argument through your presuppositions, assuming that everybody is judging the issue from your perspective of life being the most relevant factor, rather than the woman who really doesn't want to be pregnant, which is where the pro-choice side is coming from. If you refuse to take the other side on their own terms, your presuppositions are getting in the way of any productive discussion, and you need to do something about that.
But once again, that's not going to necessarily change somebody's presupposition to the contrary. Sometimes it might, but it doesn't always. And you might be thinking, well, it should. Well, that's great, but it doesn't. And that is because facts don't always determine what people will believe. Their presuppositions do.
And who is more guilty of that, the atheist or the theist? The theist points at their holy book and says it's true. The atheist says, show me it's true. And then the theist doesn't, can't, but still insists it's true. Whose presuppositions are getting in the way here, really?
And that's why we can't even have these debates and discussions. We can't even get the argument off the ground because we fundamentally disagree before we even get started. So the sooner you get to knowing somebody else's presupposition, the sooner you can get to discovering whether or not you're going to have a fruitful discussion and whether you should engage that person or not.
This sounds like he's using argument or position as synonyms for presupposition. What you need to do is find out whether someone's position, or if you prefer, their presuppositions, are flexible. And what you need to do is take the other side on their own terms instead of rewording what they say to you to make it fit your own presuppositions. In arguments, debates, I've often asked people whether they can accept that they don't understand or have misrepresented my position on a matter, whether they can wipe the slate clean and start fresh for me to explain it to them again. And usually they can't. Won't. You need to make faith unnecessary and prove God. The fetus is alive, but not a person because it has no brain. These are parts of the arguments against your positions which you've ignored or misrepresented. I'm quite certain that, were someone to explain these parts of atheism and pro-choice to you, it wouldn't matter to your argument the tiniest bit, that you're comfortable in your presuppositions and won't change them. And worse, I don't think you even want to. This makes you exactly the kind of person you're describing who isn't worth someone else's time, and the only reason I'm responding to you at all is for the benefit of others who might see this.
That's it. There's no more discussion. There's no more argument. Can't go anywhere from there because I fundamentally disagree with that premise.
You disagree. Sorry, fundamentally disagree. So we can't go anywhere. Nothing is changing your mind, apparently. Can't be done. That makes you the problem. That makes you the windmill at which nobody should continue tilting. If you're not open to the possibility that you might be wrong, then you're right. There is nothing more to discuss. And it's your fault. Until next time, fellow space travelers, this is BionicDance saying don't run on automatic. Instead, please think. I believe in it, despite the obvious breaking of what we've known about the We'd have to test it pretty thoroughly to make sure that there's no trickery. You're filtering their argument, their position through your presuppositions. Oh, yuck. You know, Dewey, we wouldn't have to do this if I had more Patreon patrons. Just saying. And remember, if it can't be in your hand, it's all in your head.